Hello. How do I start this? I don't have anything to talk about. I have a lot to say, but I don't have anything to talk about. That sounds like a weird thing to say, isn't it? Yes, yes, it is. It's a very weird thing to say. So, what I mean by that is who's my audience? I talk to myself all the time, analyzing so many things. Um, but it's kind of like talking about a very specific type of physics to someone who's never been through high school. Um, I don't know who is listening. I don't know who's going to hear this. So, what do I say to a general audience? I don't know. So, I don't have anything to talk about, but I have unlimited things to say. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does. It makes sense to me. So, I'm just going to go ahead and start talking to myself. And if you care to listen, uh, feel free to tune in. I've decided I wanted to rehash my general philosophy of life. For anybody listening, you can certainly go back and view my old videos and see what these definitions mean. I'll probably restate the definitions as I go. But I wanted to talk about why I started this process and then where I ended up. This is not scripted. So I'm just gonna see where this goes. You start with a seed and let it grow. So that's basically what I'm gonna do. It's really fascinating looking back to where I was about 25 years ago. I was extremely confused. I'd been raised in a very indoctrinatable. That's definitely not a word, but I'm gonna roll with it. Uh, I was highly indoctrinated into the Christian worldview. It was terrifying to say the least. I basically lived in a nightmare. When you're introduced to the concept of hell in explicit terms from the day you were born, basically, life is a nightmare because every moment of every day you could be called up from life and go straight into hell for no apparent reason. So my childhood, my entire childhood was a complete and utter nightmare. So you get out of the house, you get out of your birthplace, and you start looking around to see where the actual threat is. And then you realize that it's not there. So you have to start questioning everything that you thought you knew. What kind of questions are there to ask? I pondered this for a good long time. I didn't even know where to start. This goes back to the most basic questions most young men ask, I think. What is the purpose of my life? What should I do? Where should I go? How should I act? All those basic questions that are normally answered by society, you ask yourself, and then you come up with an answer. A lot of times you'll go out into life and you will have a period of finding yourself, they call it. Well, I didn't find myself. I learned myself. I already knew that I was, but I didn't know who I was. I didn't know. I'd never met myself because it had been predefined by somebody else the entire time. So who am I? What do I do? What are my motivations? What's worth doing? Those were the thoughts that were bouncing around in my head, my very naive young man's head at the time. I was about 20-ish years old. And so I had to figure this out because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know why I was doing anything. Like, seriously, I had no idea what I was doing. And I knew that. I think, at least, so everybody wears a mask. Everybody wears a mask. And everybody acts like they know everything. Everybody acts like, yeah, 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 I know all about that. I know all about that. And so it's really hard to figure out what people actually know or people actually think. You can come to some basic conclusions by talking to them. Generally speaking, if you introduce a new concept that you have a high confidence that they have no idea about, and they act like, "Oh yeah, I know about that. I know all about that." You can gather that and they have no idea what you're talking about. It creates a sense of isolation, and it makes it very difficult to seek out new information. So it's really hard to figure out if anybody else is dealing with the same questions. Everybody's lying. Everybody is lying, and I mean everyone. They're lying to themselves, they're lying to their fellow people, they're lying to their community. They're lying to their spirit of all things. They're lying to everything. People are terrified of being wrong. People are terrified of not knowing anything, really. Admitting to themselves that they don't know something is terrifying to the human. And I think most of the time, most people have been told a bunch of lies about what they should be afraid of, and they're afraid of it because they think it's there. It's not. If you go out there into the woods, you'll find a bunch of trees, maybe the occasional animal, but you're not going to find witches, you're not going to find demons, you're not going to find Bigfoot. Go look. But nobody wants to go look. They want to be in the house because either they're afraid or they don't want to go look because they've already made up their mind. So when I left my birth home environment, I was highly indoctrinated into Christianity. So I went out to the world and I looked around and I was waiting for God to show up in my mind or in my presence or whatever. Something. Anything. Nothing happened. Nothing. There was nothing. What do you do with that? You can go around and you can talk to people and they can tell you all about how God has done this and God has done that and this never-ending story of all the stuff God is doing and all the stuff there's angels and demons everywhere fighting for your soul and there's all this crazy magical shit going on. If you stop talking to people and you just go out there and walk around, nothing is out there. It's the craziest thing. It's almost like they made all this shit up in their own heads. And yeah, they did. They believed a lie, and they created a sense of identity based on that lie. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm seeing all these people, and there's no one to talk to. Everybody's already made up their mind. Everybody knows everything already. So who is there to ask questions? Nobody has any idea what they're talking about. Everyone's retarded. And so I had to figure it out myself. And I did. And I'm the better for it. I don't matter, and I know that. I am nobody. I don't exist as far as the world is concerned, and it will remain that way. And fuck them. They don't even realize how worthless they are. They'll never admit it to themselves. See, I do realize how worthless I am. I'm non-existent. I know that. I'm inconsequential. And I'm okay with that. Because here's the thing, there's always consequences. If you're inconsequential, you have no responsibility. If you're highly consequential, you have a lot of responsibility to get it right. I'm nobody, and I like it that way. Nobody cares what I think, and never will, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. If I get it wrong, I don't hurt anybody. But if somebody who is consequential gets it wrong, they hurt a lot of people. So there's good and bad with everything. All things have consequences. All good things have consequences. All bad things have consequences. There is this balance in the universe. Anyway, I think I just want to rehash and just lay out my philosophy starting from the beginning. The first question was a question I didn't know to ask. So I have to ask the question. How do you figure out what question should be asked? You don't start with a blank canvas. You start with an empty easel, okay? All you have is just the awareness you have of your past, historical memories. And if you know that everything that you've been told is a lie, what do you start with? Where do you start? What question do you start with? Trying to figure yourself out. What is your place in the universe? How does this fucking place work? What the hell's going on? What do you do? There's nowhere to go. You don't even have a path to walk down. You're in the middle of a bunch of trees inside of a fence with a locked door. I mean, where the fuck do you go? Well, you have to knock down the walls. So, I started doing something, and I didn't realize that I was doing it at the time, but I started doing something what I call listening. And, you know what listening is. But it's not with your ears. I started listening. I posed a problem. I posed a frustration that I had to the universe. I said, something is wrong. I want to know something, and I don't know what question to ask. I posed that question. And I waited. The problem was this. When you're asking, when you're a young man and you're asking, what should I do with myself? What should I do with my life? What should I do with my time? What is worth doing? That was a progression from that original statement. What is worth doing? I don't know what I should do. Now, this simplifies down to something very stupid and basic, like what kind of job should I have? That's the most common question adults ask kids is, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do I want to be when I grow up? Looking back on that question now, I'm just like, it's absurd. It's absurd to ask a person what they want to be when they grow up when you're asking them, what actions do you want to take in order to make money? What master do you want to serve? That's what you're asking. You're not asking what they want to be when they grow up. You're asking them, who do you want to serve? It's a different way of thinking about it. But anyway, these questions, posing them to yourself, are more authentic than such a question as I just laid out. What is worth doing? That's a better question. Yes, that's a better question. If I was to answer the first question, I would say, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a truck driver. I want to be a politician. I want to be a spaceman. Of course, you go through that process, but that's not the right question to ask if you want to know yourself. The next progression of this would be, what's worth doing? What is worth doing? Another way of posing this is, why should I get out of bed in the morning? You go to sleep and then you wake up. Why get up? Why? I don't know. Why should I get up? Another way to progress this question is, justify your existence. There was a movie that I watched called Utopia, and there was a question that kept being posed by one of the main protagonists. What have you done today to earn your place in this crowded world? That question is actually phrased thusly: justify your existence. I don't have to justify my existence. Thank you very much. I didn't make myself. My existence is a rhetorical question. This is something I realized after I came back from, shall we say, a psychedelic journey. This question appeared to me, justify your existence. It was a demand, not a question. Why do you exist? That's the question. Now, answer that question. Why do you exist? Why? Why is there something rather than nothing? This goes back to, the old standby philosophical questions that nobody has any answer to because they're designed not to have an answer. They're designed to make you sit there and stare at the wall. And you can't come up with an answer to absurd questions. You just can't. Well, if you change the question, then you can give an answer. So, it's a rhetorical question. My existence is not a product of cause and effect. Now, if you're a religious person, you could say that, God knows every hair on your head and he has a great plan for your life and blah, 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 blah bullshit. Yeah, you could say that. But if you don't believe a religious lie and you simply accept the fact that you are here, the question becomes rhetorical. Why do you exist? Here's the answer. Why not? Why do you exist? Justify your existence. Why do you exist? The answer is, why not? You see what happens there. It turns it back on the questioner. They're demanding that you justify your existence, something you had no role to play in. Life was imposed upon you. You never asked for this. But you are being told to justify it, as if you were the one who did it. I didn't make my parents have sex. I didn't make my parents birth me. I didn't make my parents keep me from dying until I was of age. I had nothing to do with it. So you telling me to justify it is absurd. So when you say, justify your existence, why do you exist? I have one answer. Why not? Rhetorical question shuts down the question being posed. So now that we have that out of the way, we simply accept the fact that we do exist. Now the question moves on. What should you do with your time? What's worth doing? I don't know. That's the right answer every time you start with an honest question. I don't know is the first immediate answer to every question you pose. Otherwise, don't ask a question. Simply state an answer. A question is an interrogative, needing information you don't have. So you don't start off by just spouting an answer off. You pose the question and then find the answer. because you don't have the answer, which is why you asked the question in the first place. So, we're now at this point where we say, what is worth doing? I am, I exist, I don't have to justify it. Now, I ask the question, what's worth doing? You move on, you progress past this question, because the answer to that question is also invalid. What are you asking when you ask what is worth doing? You're asking something else, something more fundamental. Because when you say what's worth doing, all you're doing is saying which value scale do I appeal to legitimize my action? You could appeal to your family and your history and your heritage. You could appeal to the political environment. You could appeal to money. You could appeal to all kinds of value systems. And I've made a video discussing the definition of what value is. But getting back to the fundamental issue is when I asked what's worth doing, I'm actually asking something more fundamental. The question is, what does value actually mean? What does it mean to say something is valuable? Because you have to start with that before you ask what is valuable within a certain context. You can't say what's valuable if you don't know what value means. You have to know what value means before you ask what value something has. You see, it's more fundamental. Until you know that, you can't ask that question. So, I pose the question: what does value mean? It was an awakening moment. It was an independent thought. It was a product of listening. I was given that question. I didn't derive it from my environment. It was given to me. So I asked that question. What does value mean? And the answer came fairly quickly. Value is the concept of relativity. What do I mean by this? Well, tell me something that has value. State anything. Anything that could potentially have value. Say a dollar bill. That's my go-to. What is the value of a dollar bill? Now, most times people will pose an answer something like this. They'll say, the value of a dollar bill is whatever it is that I'm willing to trade you for it. The value of a dollar bill is 1/4 the value of a loaf of bread. They start making these comparison statements. That was an awakening moment for me. Because what you're doing is you are saying that the value of anything is relative to something else. The value of anything is relative to something else. Now remember, this is an extension of the original question. The original question was, what's worth doing? What is worth doing at all? Justify your actions, right? These are fundamental theory of mind shit, okay? This is big shit. This gives you satisfaction in life as a person. These are huge, important questions. Okay? And we're going back to loaves of bread and dollar bills. But it does get you there eventually. So, stay with me. So, what is the value of a dollar bill? Here's the answer. You can't answer that question. I didn't ask you what the value of something, how much of something is a dollar worth. I didn't ask that question. I did not ask how much of something else is a dollar worth. I didn't ask that. I asked what the value of a dollar is. I call it the X equals fallacy. You're looking for a discrete concept when it's not a discrete concept. It's a relative concept. X equals what? X is unknown. X doesn't equal anything until you introduce new factors. So it's an X equals fallacy. You're asking what the value of something is when the thing that you're talking about is an unknown. So it occurred to me. Every time you ask the question of what the value of anything is, you're asking a comparison statement. So here's the answer to the question of what does value mean? Value is the concept of relativity. The concept of relativity, where the only way to judge value is to compare two different things. That's what value is. So I ask you, what is worth doing in life? What is worth doing? You are asking to make a value judgment. So, you're asking an X equals fallacy question. You're asking what's worth doing. If you ask what's worth doing, you're never going to find an answer. It's never going to be satisfactory. That's why people have such a hard time when they go find themselves. They don't have a reference because they're asking the wrong question. They're asking to make a value judgment without a comparison. Value is the concept of relativity. If you are not comparing two different things, the concept of value is meaningless. Please understand what I'm saying. The concept of value only applies when you are comparing two or more things. So when you ask what it does value mean, what's worth doing, you are asking to compare two discrete states or things. So I could tell you this. Within the context of a job, for example, what's worth doing? Doing good work, clocking in and out on time, rising in the ranks, getting a promotion, getting a raise. Those things matter in that context. Now, if you go outside of that business, those things no longer matter because you don't have something to compare it to. There is no value in a vacuum. Go out into the desert and try to get a raise. Will you be motivated to do that? It's absurd, you see. And that's why I think most people, when they're looking for meaning in life and they're asking the wrong questions, they're very frustrated and upset. That's why, because they're asking the wrong question. You're looking for value when you're not making a discrete comparison. That's not how things work, bud. There is no value in a vacuum. Why do you get up in the morning? Why? Well, give me a value scale. You are, when you get up in the morning and you have a family and you have responsibilities and you have all these things, those are reasons to get up in the morning. If you don't have any of those, there is no reason to get up in the morning. So the necessary expansion of that would be, well, why don't you just lay down and die? No. That's not, you don't conclude an absurd conclusion when you don't have an answer. You just say, I don't know. Moron? No, you don't have to jump to conclusions. You don't have to have an answer. You have to ask the right question first, and then wait for the answer. Seek the answer. If you jump out there and say, well, here's your answer, you're going to be wrong. Every time. Humble yourself and admit you don't know something. It's that simple. So, these are some things that I learned as I was progressing from a state of mind where everybody, I think, everybody starts their life from. That was my journey. It was just the initial start. My first real question in life was, what does value mean? And it has been fundamental in my understanding of the world. Why do people do what they do? I'll tell you why they do what they do. Because they think what they're doing is important. That's why people do what they do. They think what they're doing is important. It's not, but they think so. That's why they get up in the morning. They feel compelled. They're wrong. They're confused. And that's okay. The world needs breeders. The world needs workers. Sure. Nobody wants to ask the questions. That's fine. But I did. So here I was. Young man, desperately trying to understand what the hell was going on. So now I understood. I was asking the wrong question. I was constantly dissatisfied. Because I was asking the wrong question. Once I had the right question, suddenly I stopped asking that bad question, and I just recognized the answer to the new question. The new question was, what does value mean? Once I knew what that was, I stopped asking what's worth doing, because guess what? Every value scale that you appeal to give your life meaning is going to disappoint you. I didn't realize that at the time, but once I understood what value was, suddenly I see everything in a new context. You get a job. And you're a young buck, you're getting out there, and you realize about 10, 20 years down the line that you've been basically wasting your time. because nobody likes you, nobody cares about you, everything that you do is irrelevant, and you just wake up suddenly one day and you're like, what the hell have I been doing this whole time? You know, questions like this, issues like this, are fundamental to the experience of existence. They are massively important. At least the sense of satisfaction one derives from being alive. These are fundamental, but everybody treats it like it's trash. It's kind of hilarious, you know. So if you rely, here's the problem: if you are relying on a value scale to determine your sense of justification for your life, do you see where I'm going with this? It's so absurd. I don't even want to say it. It's absurd. You're a slave, man. You are a slave and you're happy about it. I cannot imagine being like that. It's absurd. But there's a lot of people like that. They derive their sense of satisfaction in life from their job, from their family, from terrestrial pursuits. They are their environment. So thank you. This is an extension to where I started asking a new question. The new question was, who are you? Who are you? I'll ask you. Anybody listening, who are you? Can you answer that question? I imagine that your answer would be along the lines of something in your memory. So, for example, I am a white person. I am a Christian. I am a Sikh. I am Indian. You know, you state your demographic profile, whatever. State your skin color, state your, home country, etc., etc. You are, and then you fill in the blank with something in your environment. Concepts that existed before you did. You say, I am this thing. Are you now? Are you sure about that? I beg to differ. And then, immediately that would cause somebody who is very strongly aligned with their sense of identity, they would get upset. They say, I'm a patriot, I'm a good American. I fought for my country. Saying that is just, it's so absurd to say that now that I know more about American history. But anyway, they say I'm a patriot, I'm a good American, I'm a Christian, I'm a taxpayer. They state some kind of role they have in their local community. They state, they state the name of their country. These are things that people identify with. Well, what is the common factor among all those things that they listed? They're environmental. They're external to the self. People identify themselves with externalities. People identify themselves with externalities. What do I mean by that? You are not your family. You are not. I know you think that. But you're not your family. You're not your kids. You're not your parents. You're not your brothers or sisters. You're not your fellow humans that look like you. You're not this country that was invented about 300 years ago. That's not you, bud. Sorry to tell you. But you've been living a lie this whole time. Anybody, I'm not talking to anybody in particular, but this is how I talk to myself. I present myself as the antagonist of the argument. So just, externalize the pronouns I'm using, the personal pronouns. You are not your family. You are not these things that you identify with. You're not your favorite food. You're not your favorite color. You're not your favorite beverage. You're not whiskey. You're not the most exquisite whiskey in the world, which is Johnny Walker Black, and I will fight you about that. I'm just kidding. You're not this thing that you identify yourself with. Those things are out there. Those things are out there. If you didn't know about them, you wouldn't identify yourself with them. But you know about them, therefore you identify yourself with them. You are an automaton if you do that. Dead inside. Your mind is not alive if you identify yourself with your external environment, with your environment, terrestrial environment. If you do this, you're lying to yourself, and your behavior matches. I'm not surprised. Let's just put it that way. I'm not surprised. You are dead inside. You are an automaton. You are a robot. This is the fundamental reason, I think, why we have such a huge population of morons today. You look around. How many people do you meet in the world, in your environment? How many people would you say are honestly intelligent? Think for themselves, think independently. How many people? I would venture to guess it's not many. I know that's been my experience. And I think the fundamental reason is because people identify themselves with their environment, and therefore they can't see themselves as external to it. So, I'll pose the question again. Who are you? Who are you? You have to answer thusly, I don't know. And stop, without trying to fill in the blanks. And wait. Ponder the question. Think about it, consider it. Get frustrated, get angry that the answer's not readily apparent. But eventually, the answer will reveal itself. Here's my answer. Here's who I am. My answer is, I am. That's all. It's not something exciting. It's not something amazing. It's not something like comparing yourself to the statement made by the Jewish God Yahweh. It's not something like that. It's just stating the obvious. The obvious statement is I am. I exist. I am myself. It's self-referential. That's your answer. I am. I am. It's self-referential. I am not my fucking khakis. I am not Jack's complete lack of surprise. I am not my coffee table. I am not my belongings. I am not my property. I am not my family. I am not my children. I am. That is all. And so are you. You just don't know it, most likely. That's the truth. And once you understand this, you can stop asking retarded questions. Who are you? I am wealthy. I've got $10 million in the bank. Oh, you're wealthy. You know your money's fake, right? How dare you? How dare you? But this is the problem with identity questions. When people ask you who you are, especially nowadays, people want to throw out their name. They want to throw out their name, and they want to throw out their gender and their sexual preference. This is what people do. It's obnoxiously absurd. But it is what it is. But I think fundamentally the reason people are doing that is because they don't know how to ask the right questions. The question is, who are you? That's the question. The answer is, you are. That's your answer. I know it's not satisfying because it doesn't appeal to a hierarchy. And this is something about human nature that I have absolutely concluded. Human nature is fundamentally defined by the concept of the hierarchy. Competitions. Who's better or worse? Who's more wealthy? Who's more important? Who's more this or that? Comparison statements. The hierarchy. And you rank yourselves. It's pretty hilarious, actually. Humans rank themselves all the time. And they always want to be better than the next guy. Even in attempting to show humility, where they say, "Oh well, I'm so glad that you're this way," because and they're separating themselves and setting themselves up on a separate hierarchy of what they want to call humility. Because I am supporting you. I am so great. Virtue signaling is the name for it. They're still following their fundamental nature, which is the hierarchy. The concept of the hierarchy is human nature. And it's pretty hilarious to watch. So when you ask the question, who are you? You immediately try to appeal to a hierarchy and say, I am actually a good person because, and then you list off your characteristics. You say, well, I have this much money, I have that much money, I have this much wealth, I have this much stuff, I have this big a house, I have, you identify yourself, or I have a number of family members, I have this connection with God, you identify yourself with all these external factors. But you don't choose things like, I'm a garbage person, I'm a terrible person, I'm a murderer. That's who I identify as. No, you run away from that. You run away from the bad things that you've done, or the bad things that you are, whatever. You run away from those things, obviously. Why would you do that? The reason you do that is because you want to be elevated on the hierarchy. That is human nature. Your internal awareness of a hierarchy, that's what you're trying to elevate yourself on. You want to feel like you're one of the club, you want to feel like you're included, and hopefully you you meekly say, I want to be one of the top guys. I want to be high on the hierarchy. I want to be elevated on the hierarchy. That's what you say to yourself, internally, subconsciously even. But the truth is, it's all a lie. It's all an illusion. That's what you're sold. You are sold this idea that you are your external environment. It is not true. And here's why I can say that with confidence. I came up with this concept called returning to zero. It was the answer that I had to develop. I developed this concept rather than waiting for an answer to appear. I had to develop a new set of language. I had developed new vocabulary in order to, lay this out, this concept. So I call it returning to zero. It is a process. It's a technique by which you can return to who you were when you were born. Now, I say that, and the automatic answer almost always is the same. You want me to be a baby? You want me to be stupid like a baby? See, this is what I mean when people just automatically fill in the blanks when they don't know what I'm talking about. They have no idea what I'm talking about, but they just automatically jump on an answer that just pops in their head, even though they are completely ignorant. This is the nature of man, because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look like they don't know something. Well, the truth is, they don't know anything. And that's okay. Humans are what they are. I developed this technique. I call it. It's a process. It's a step-by-step process. It's called returning to zero. Before I do that, I have to set the table. Who are you? Well, I will answer that question in a different way. Yes, I am. Yes, you are. However, a better answer to that question, a more solid answer to that question is this. You are who you were when you were born. Your sense of identity is now what it was when you were born. You are who you were when you were born. You've never been different. You've always been the same exact person. You are who you were when you were born. Yes, you have new knowledge. Yes, you have a lifetime of experience. Yes, you have lots of memories. Yes. But you're not those things, though. Those things came later. If you identify yourself with them, you will be disappointed because it will make no sense to you. Things come and go. When you lose your partner, your life partner, your wife, your husband, whatever, when you lose those people that you identify with, you're sad, you're despondent. People jump out of buildings because they lost their job, because they identify with the job. Now they lost everything, they're homeless, they're unhappy, and so they end themselves. Why? Because they define themselves by those things that they lost. That's why. Fundamental questions of identity is why people kill themselves. If they don't have an answer to who the fuck are you and why are you here, the answer is, well, I don't know, so I guess I'll go kill myself now. That's why people kill themselves, because they don't know who the fuck they are. Once you do, there's never a good reason to off yourself. Sometimes there is, Sometimes you do make that decision, but almost everyone ends themselves for one particular reason. That reason is they don't know who the fuck they are, and they don't know what they do, and they don't know why they're doing it. That's why. So, I had to develop a concept called returning to zero. That is where you go from where you're at now, awake, conscious, adult, with all the mental faculties that life has offered you. You have the ability to reason, you have the ability to use logic, you have a history and an awareness of your environment, etc. You have all these things. Now, remove them as factors in your identity. That is what the process of returning to zero is. So, we have to introduce some new vocabulary. One is called chains of identity. Chains of identity are things that you define yourself by. That's what they are. They are what I call artificial success objectives. These are derived from your community, whether big or small. In a small house, in a small family, you have a general value system from which you define the value of anything. Is it good or bad to steal? Well, in a Western family, it's a bad thing to steal. Maybe in a Middle Eastern family, it's a good thing to steal. Maybe in a mafia family, it's a good thing to steal. It depends on who you're stealing from. These things vary. So, I'm going to come from a Western normal middle class perspective. In a Western normal middle class perspective, it's bad to steal. So, this is of value that you can relate to. You relate things to a value system. Within a small community, like a family, you have a small value system. That value system is derived from a bigger value system. I won't go through all the layers, but we'll just jump to religion. In religion, you have a value system. In Christianity, it comes from the Bible, okay, which comes from the New Testament, and that came from the Old Testament, and that came from, I won't go into the depth of that because it's a big bucket of shit that I don't want to step in right now. But so you see my point. We have these overlying layers of value that we appeal to. So I've used the term dome in the past. It's a visual picture of this concept. It's an encasement, a globe, if you will, a snow globe, meaning not globe like Earth. I'm talking about an encasement of glass, right, that you can walk through. It's kind of like a force field. This is just all I'm doing is creating this picture, right, in your head. Imagine a force field, or I used a dome bowl that I put over top of a community. Now, on that dome bowl are words that are written on there. These represent values that everybody inside of there collectively agrees with. We'll take a Western middle-class family, for example. Good husband, good father, good mother, a successful parent, not a deadbeat, pays your taxes, keeps your yard mowed. All these values that are particular to this one particular community are written on this glass dome, on this force field. Now, from those values, you identify with one or two or three or four. I'm going to be a good father. I'm going to be a good soldier. I'm going to be a good patriot. You identify yourself with those things, and now they are who you are. I call them chains of identity. So imagine you select from this menu on this glass enclosure, you select 5, right? Now imagine that you have a chain made of links, and on each one of those links there's a word printed on it. The selection you've made from your dome is the word that's printed on each one of those links, and it's attached to you somehow. So this is your visual perspective of somebody who has an identity derived from their environment. Okay, are you with me? I hope so. The process of returning to zero, okay, is removing the chains of identity. There's still a thing out there, okay? There's such a thing as a good father. There's such a thing as a good citizen and a good husband and a good wife and a good this and that. There's such a thing as those values. But you don't attach them to yourself. You don't define yourself by them, which is absurd. You remove that, but you have to go into your subconscious to do it. Well, you can't access your subconscious, so how the fuck do you get back to zero? And again, what is zero? Returning to zero is the process of getting your mindset and your sense of self back in alignment, back into the same place you were when you were born. That's what returning to zero is. Your sense of self that you were born with. It's the same. It's never changed. It's there to pick up if you want it. But what happens is people like to pile shit on top of themselves and wallow in it. That's what people like to do. Why? Because they get external validation. They get pats on the head. They get kudos from their friends. Congratulations. You're a waste of a life if you do that. You're not your fucking khakis. You're not your coffee table. You're not your job. You're not your apartment. You are. And that is all. So, moving on. How do you return to zero? I've laid this out. Feel free to view my past videos. But to summarize it, is a process of unclipping one at a time each one of those values that you've attached to yourself. Now, how do you do that? Okay, so there was a time before you identified yourself as whatever. We'll say X. There was a time before you identified yourself as X. Okay? You picked that up along the way. You were not that at the point of birth. If there's anything that you define yourself by that was introduced into your existence after your moment of birth, it is a lie. Anything, and I mean everything, that you possibly have ever identified yourself with since you were born is a lie. Now, how do you do this? If you want to. It's It's entirely up to you if you want to live inside the cage or get out. And your problems don't suddenly disappear once you understand who you are. I can promise you that. But if you do want to understand who you are, you have to return to zero first. Wipe the slate clean. The only way to do that is to reset your sense of identity that you built up over time. Returning to zero is the removal of the artificial success objectives that you have defined yourself by throughout your life. That's what it is in a nutshell. Now, how do you do that? You remember a time before you had that aspect, that characteristic. You remember yourself, remember who you were before that moment in time. Remember who you were. There was a time before you had the particular favorite color you have now. What was your favorite color back then? Okay, maybe your favorite color is white right now. And back in the day, maybe your favorite color was yellow and you hated white. Okay, you see how this changes. That's a simplified explanation. Now, before you hit puberty, did you want sex? No, girls were gross, right? Boys were gross, girls were gross, everything was gross. But it changed when you went through puberty and now you have testosterone in your head. There was a time before you needed sex. And at that time, you didn't need sex. If you can remember what it was like, you can return to zero. You see my point? You are trying to access and reset your subconscious mind. That's what you're doing with this. So think about the things that you define yourself by, your family. And now, I am not saying you need to go out and get a divorce immediately. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to understand who the hell you are. Stay married, get divorced, whatever. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with you. It's not who you are, whether you stay married or not. It's just part of your environment. But if you define yourself by it, that's where problems arise. You are not your marriage. You are not your family. You are not your children. You are not your partner. You are. You're not your body. Crazy idea. You're not your body. You're not your bank account. You're not any of these external factors. Okay? If you you were born in, say, a middle class American suburb living family, right? Now, let's just say, for example, that you're born in the Congo somewhere. Your value system is going to be substantially different, don't you think? Say you were born in Australia. Your value system is going to be substantially different because you probably will be a Catholic or a non-religious family, or as opposed to a evangelical Christian or whatever. You see, what you start with makes all the difference. And as far as you're concerned, this is the world everyone lives in. No, this is the world that you live in, bucko. But you identify yourself with it. You just identify yourself with it. And now, that's all she wrote. You're going to be disappointed, man. And that's fine. You can be that way. There's a lot of people who live in cages. Go ahead. I don't care. It's no skin off my nose. But if you want to understand who the hell you are, you have to return to zero first. There is a process to this. Accessing your subconscious mind is very confusing and hard to do. But once you start doing it, it becomes easier. Okay, this is not some esoteric stare at the wall for hours kind of thing. That has its uses. Meditation, that has its uses, but that's not what I'm talking about. You will not solve the problem without addressing the issue directly. You cannot understand the universe without opening your eyes to it. You cannot ask the question without listening. So, the first thing you have to do to understand who the hell you are is to return to zero. Reset your subconscious mind to an earlier time. The subconscious is the enemy. You have to remove things you've defined yourself by. I call them chains of identity. Now, the way that you do this is you remember a time before that chain of identity was attached to you. Your mindset before you identified yourself with whatever it is. Motorcycles, for example. I used to have this really strong attachment to motorcycles, and I called myself a biker, The truth is, I was never a biker. It was an illusion, because I was desperately trying to find something to identify with. Okay? I still have a motorcycle. I still ride it, but I'm not a biker. I simply am. You see what I'm saying? Do you understand? I'm not a biker. I'm not a nurse. Okay? I went to nursing school. I got a nursing license. I have the legal authorization to practice nursing in certain states. I'm not an RN. I am. That's all. Do you understand? The way to do this is to return to zero. That is a process. That is a method to reset your sense of identity. to where it belongs. You are who you were when you were born. You will die who you were when you were born. If you can understand this, you can see the gravity of returning to zero, the importance of doing this. It's not easy. It's painful. It's difficult. It's terrifying. Because you have to let go of everything that you think you are. Returning to zero will align yourself with who you actually are right now. You're living in an illusion that you created for yourself. It's a cage that you built, and now you live in it. Do you want out? Well, the first thing you have to do is return to zero. And again, the process to do this is you could do it on paper. I've done this before, but you won't know. You won't know everything, okay? But as you continue to take off those chains of identity one after the other, you're going to discover more and more and more and more and more. Because this is your entire life that has culminated into who you are now. All these things that you define yourself as is a lifetime's worth of work, and you're dismantling it. So this is a process that you can physically do, psychologically do, on purpose, rather than waiting for the cosmos to come down and reveal itself, whatever. Like all those soothsaying gurus like to say, you're gonna dance around in a field naked somewhere. That's not what this is. What you do is you consciously remember who you were before that chain of identity was attached to you. What was your mindset before you identified yourself with that external factor? Remember what it was like, and you can return to that state of mind. Every single chain of identity that you have defined yourself by to today, one at a time, remember when you defined yourself by that thing, and then remember before and return to that point. Eventually, when you get really good at it, you can actually return to zero, to the point where you were born. Your mindset will be completely reset. That's the outcome of returning to zero. You will never feel compulsion again. Stress will no longer be a factor in your life. That's what happened with me, because I don't feel obligated to do anything. Everything I do is voluntary. I don't lay blame on anyone. I could go into all the intricacies and all the details of what happens when you return to zero. You understand who the hell you are, and you live in that state of mind. I could just blow your mind with all the benefits, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter. Unless you're experiencing it, it does not matter to you. So there's no point in going into it. But I am offering you this, a method by which you can remember who you were when you were born. And that method is very simple. Every single thing that you can think of, that you define yourself as, remember back before the moment where you identified yourself with that thing. Put yourself back into that frame of mind and stay there. And then next week, think about another one. Remember where you started identifying yourself with that thing. Now, remember before you started identifying with that thing and stay there. Eventually, you get to a point you no longer define yourself by your external environment. There's nowhere to go now. So, ask the question, who are you? The only answer that anyone could possibly give at the state of mind at the point of zero is I am. Because that was who you were when you were born. That's how you're going to die. That's who you are now. You just don't realize it. So you seek after things. You seek after things in life, right? You seek after sex. You seek after addictions. You seek after food. You seek after good cars, cool cars, blah, 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 blah. You seek after all these things, right? Why? One must ask why. Why do you do that? Why? Well, I could give you a reason. But that's something that each person has to answer for. Why do they do what they do? Why do you do what you do? What do you do and why? Why matters more than what. Why you do what you do is more important than what you do. But if you don't know who you are, you don't know why you do what you do. That's a problem. Only if you care why you do things. I did. I cared very much why I did anything. And this is where I'm at. I can tell you this. No way in hell would I ever go back. I have no stress. My mind is clean. That's something a lot of people can't say. So there are amazing benefits to this state of mind. But it's important to realize you always were that way. You always were that way. It's not some kind of like special club. You're already at the point of zero. You just don't realize it. You're in a cage, but you don't have to be in the cage. Just walk out the door. It's not locked. There is a method to do this. There is a method to do this, and it's something you can do. Anybody can do it, or stay in your cage. It's fine with me. There are consequences to this too. There's consequences to everything. At a certain point, you realize that there is no point to doing anything, and then you have to relearn what that means. Because most of the time, the reason you do things is some kind of motivation factor. You want to, and then fill in the blank with some kind of emotional, subconscious desire that you can't really put your finger on. That's usually why people do things. I want to get that crack. I want to get that crack, man. I want to get my meth, whatever drug. You need that drugs. You're gonna go out and get it. Did you need that drug? No, you didn't. But psychologically, you did. You have a chemical dependency. Whatever. Why do you do what you do? You don't know. You just do it. Emotions. I'll tell you why you do things. Emotions. Emotions are why you do things, by and large. Could be curiosity too, but that's a different thing. Most people, I would say, do things because of an expectation of a reward called emotions. They want to go to the club. Why do they want to go to the club? Well, they want to go to the club so that they can grip a glass that's full. They can grip a vessel that's full of an alcoholic beverage and then drink it down and then move around in a public area. No, that's what they're physically doing. What are they going to do? They're not doing that. They're going to have fun. They're going to go hang out with some girls. In their heads, it's this emotional trip that they're imagining. That's why they do that. The ringing bell is what the dog is salivating for. The expectation of some emotional reward is what drives people to go to the club. That's why they do that. Is that what they're going to tell you? No. They're not going to tell you that. Then the dog's not going to say, I want the bell, so I'm salivating. The dog is going to say, I want the food, and when I hear the bell, the food's coming. That's not what the dog is going to tell you. You see what I'm saying? So, the point is, understanding what you do and why you do it starts with understanding who you are. Until you do that, you'll never be able to articulate why you do anything. So, I think that's good for now. I hope this was interesting. Hope you got something out of it. I know I did. I always get something out of it. I talk to myself all the time. And I encourage everybody to talk to themselves. The reason? Because only you know exactly what you mean. So anyway, until next time, thanks for listening.